I mean, it was very obvious to me that the house needed to be lifted, considering 2 years in a row water was in the house for Irene and for Sandy.
We had like 3 foot of water in our home.
I guess after we came back to the house, we saw what the house looked like. We had talked about lifting the house, right? And then we decided that we were going to lift. We weren't going to wait for anybody. We were going to use our money to get the house going.
We came back like 2 days later, and we got all our cleaning supplies. We cleaned up as best we could, and then we started rebuilding the inside.
And we went out. We looked. I think it was four lifters came.
And I know Sandy was kind of a superstorm, but it's going to happen again. And why not be lifted so that I don't have to worry about having to repair my home in any way?
Well, we shopped around, and we had different estimates, and we did see Tri-Bar's elevation on one of the streets here in Port Monmouth, and we liked the way his equipment worked.
And we decided on Tri-Bar. We liked the equipment that he had. We felt that was a lot safer than going up on cribs and leaving it, and also for the fact that he was one of the only ones that had the complete package.
A little apprehension because you don't want anything to happen to your home when it's lifted.
No, we didn't worry.
No.
We knew there were problems with the house, but with Barry, he explained everything, and it was a hard lift for him, but he did it. And the house is safe and strong and secure. I wouldn't go with anybody else.
I enjoy construction, but the construction never gave me the satisfaction that I get when I lift someone's home and I take them from being worried, concerned, to lifted, secure, and I go back in it. There's another element to what I'm doing now, not just constructing something, which has its own satisfaction, but I'm actually helping people in a way that gives me personal satisfaction. It really does make me feel good. This DVD will give you an example of what it's like to have your house lifted by Tri-Bar with the most advanced lift system that I've ever seen before, fail-safe lift system. The DVD will take you through the various steps that we employ to get underneath your house, to lift your house, to lift it up to the correct elevation, to build a new foundation for you, to set you back down, to connect you to the foundation, to build you an entrance. And when you're finished, you'll get a sense of what your house will go through to get to that point. Port Monmouth is it's unique because it has Belford and Belford Creek on one side, a bunch of sedges, a lot of swamp marsh, and then it generally is a piece of land that's higher than the swamp marsh on one side and the swamp marsh on the other side. So you don't know if you're going to run into some areas where there may be soft subsurface soil. They do soil borings, which gives you more information about what you're lifting off of. And we dig some test pits around the property. And also, when we're getting ready to set our towers, we're digging in to seat the towers. And we get to see what kind of structure we have below us. Husband and wife are wonderful people. He's retired. They have a great relationship, a beautiful apple tree in the front yard, and she loves to make apple pie. Sweet, sweet people. I measure up the house, and then I have to figure out what I'm going to need to lift it up. Basically, it's how many feet of beam and where I'm going to place the beams. Mr. White showed me that there was a trapdoor in his bedroom floor that allowed me to get into the substructure. Then there's a new section to the house, and there's an old section to the house. You can't get into the new section, so I never got to see it. I had to assume that the joists were built in a certain way, and then I had to get into it to make sure. So my preparation was to see if the structure was the way that I had envisioned it in my mind, and then to make sure I had the right stuff there on a job site to lift it. So the day they moved out, the day after I got the disconnect letters, I still had to wait for the lift permit, but we opened up underneath the house. We started our insertion of the beams, which is the first step. So we're going to be inserting the steel beams into the house. The first thing we do is we pick a location that's going to be in proximity to the outside sill plate. That's going to get the best bite of the house when we lift up. So we try to make sure it's balanced. We study the underside, and we pick the location. Most of the beams that we're lifting is 2 tons. Straps are rated for 5 ton. And our beams come in 40-foot, 20-foot, 30-foot, 10-foot sections, depending upon what we need. We have a certified welder that works with us, that works for us, and he's there, and we build our own beams. We have our end plates all fabricated at a machine shop that uses water jets to cut it because the tolerances are really tight on that. But our certified welder welds it all up for us, so we're able to have different size beams. So we slide it under the house on a conveyor. You'll see the conveyor being moved into place here. The excavator is moving the beam under the house. The weight of the beam's not on the conveyor as of yet. Depending upon the length of the house, we use these beams in whatever combination makes sense. We place them in proximity to the outside sill plate in a location that would best balance the house. You really have to make sure you support it in many different ways. Those large beams really do help us in a lot, but we've also come up with other systems that we're building into our system now to help carry the outside edges. And you might see some of those devices later on in the film. We bolt them together. The lifting foreman I have, his name's Will Nelson. He's been with me since 7 years now. He's wiry, he climbs around underneath it. He's got a real edge for wanting everything to be perfect. So while everyone's in a hurry to get the house lifted, he's really controlled, really concerned about level, really concerned about solid, and doing a very good job. And it makes me feel very secure that if I leave the job site, he's got my back, and he's got a lot of control of what we're doing and really does a good job at it. One of the best parts of this system is that as we're inserting it, we can adjust things. As we start lifting a house, if a tower comes out of line, we can jack up underneath the beam and hold the beam and re-establish the balance or level of the tower. That's not something that other lifters can do. They're working with cribs. They're working with wooden blocks. That's one of the best parts of a lift system that's like this. You see the beam being inserted into the house. He's adjusting it. Remember that when he pushes it forward, it moves into the house. Here it is on a conveyor being pushed in. Once we slide them into place, you'll see that we jack them up or we pull them up with the excavator and we put some blocking under it just to hold it up. Because when we put the lifter or the tower underneath it, we need clearance in order to get the beam into the tower. So we push it up against the house until we get it into the tower. And then what we will do is we'll just, as we have it in the tower, we build blocking underneath the house. We put 6-inch blocking in the center, 4-inch blocking toward a third of the way from the outside, and 0. So we're actually pushing the beam down in the center, which to your eye would look like the house is being bent, but your house is not being bent. The house is actually flat. The blocking is actually keeping it cradled. So essentially what you're looking at with the beam bending like that is a house cradled in the wood blocking that's holding it under the joists. It really is a way of keeping the house safe and comfortable. I think it has more to do with the fact that we're placing the beam in the position we want it to be in. Nothing about what we do is light. This is all steel, and everything that we use is very strong, very rated, very heavy. It's very good in the respect that it's all calculated weight. You're not guessing as to how much a piece of wood's going to carry in weight. That steel is rated. That lifter is rated as a capacity for 30 tons. Here we are adjusting the elevation of the base of that lifter tower, adding some fill underneath it to square it off and make it level.
Our home is being elevated by Tri-Bar. Right now, today, I want it to be done with. I want it to be over so I can get back in my house and enjoy the home I have.
So when we get ready to lift the house, when we set the beams in place, that process from the time we open the holes in the walls, we set the beams underneath, we dig out for the towers and we set the towers in place and then insert the beams back into the lifting device. it takes a good solid day. It may seem like a long time compared to other people who are using much smaller beams, but with the care I want to take lifting your home, I always try to make sure I have it balanced right, packed out right, and set right before I go to lift it. My goal isn't to lift your house quickly. My goal is to lift your house safely. And the only way I can do that is by being level, being square, taking our time, and making sure we've got a good hold on your house in every way that house needs to be lifted. And the next thing you're going to see is the actual lifting of a house that we did on Washington Avenue in Highlands. This house is a two-story, fairly conventional. The lift is in place and we're ready to go. Everything is set up. This is day 2. We've inserted the beams and we have the lift towers in place. This would be the day that we're going to be lifting your house. That's our lifting tower. We're set right there for a 14-foot lift.
He's got to check something.
We're tightening up the beams here. We're tightening the bolts up. Everything has to be tight and snugged. You'll see us breaking the block to make sure that there's no anchors holding the house down. But before we can lift it, I have to crawl around underneath there and look in all the different corners, and I have to look to make sure that there are no hidden surprises. I want to make sure that the blocking that I spoke about earlier that's placed on top of the beam to properly deflect and keep your house level is all in place in the right spots. So I'll be underneath the house for the first hour or two of the day to make sure that everything is right before we push the buttons to start lifting your home. Things I look for is anchor bolts. The guys know they're supposed to remove them all. They're underneath there. They're spending time to make sure that's done. But until I go around and check, I'm not sure. I'm not positive, and I want to make sure. I don't want anything bad to happen. I'm underneath the house when it's lifted because I really want to make sure that there's no part of your house that's being hung up and not coming up so you come out of balance. Houses crack because lifters lift it out of balance, meaning it's crooked. One corner's coming up. The other corner's not lifting because something's holding it down. The other lifters would measure the pressure in the jack systems underneath each section of the house to make sure that they're picking it with the same pressure all the time. We are concerned mostly with the level of your house. I want your house to be level the entire time because if I'm maintaining a level home, whether the back is heavier than the front or vice versa, it doesn't make a difference if I'm picking it level because I'm not tilting your house. Everything is coming up balanced. That one thing is what I think is the most important part about our lift system. By keeping levels on the house, I mean level front to back, right to left, being sure that your house is secure perfectly. I mean making sure it's blocked right and making sure nothing's hanging up, holding it down. Those are the things we're looking for right now at this point in time in this film. We're getting ready to lift.
House is coming up, it looks steady. The stairs were a little tight to the building. We moved it up a little bit. Now it's coming up fine. We got good clearance all the way around. We got good separation. So we look like we got a good bite on the house and it's coming up smoothly.
The fail-safe lift system is the only system that I know of, in fact the only one in this country, that actually lifts a house from outside. All other lifters actually put lifting devices underneath the house, on underside of the beams, and push up from the underside. So they really don't get to see the outside of the house, what's happening on the outside and what's happening on the inside. The lift towers lift the house up, and we use 8-foot levels, so they're very long span levels, and we're watching the bubbles the whole time. So we're watching the house come up level from the outside, which is not something that the traditional lifters do. They concentrate on pressure, which it may work for them. I don't know. It really doesn't matter to me. What I love about this system is when I lift, I'm able to control every part of it. I'm able to control the level of the house. I'm able to control the balance of the house. I'm able to control the lift towers if they come out of balance. I can freeze the system. I can block up a beam, and then I can write this. And believe me, each tower we pay particular attention to. Does it stay in level? Now, when the tower accepts the weight of your house, the pressure that's put on the tower is exerted on the soil below it. So if the soil is slightly soft in one section or the other, a tower can come out of balance. Well, that's true about anything that's any cribbing, but they're underneath the house, so you really don't see the same square that you would see as you do at my towers. Those towers that I'm using, when they come out of level, and just slightly, we stop, we fix the beam, we fix the tower, and we continue on lifting, keeping it level. Each tower has its own control. There's a master lifter on one side and a master lifter on the other, controlling both towers. We're communicating back and forth with a walkie-talkie or with a guy that's actually signaling what's happening on the other end. We move in small increments, so we'll get it up maybe 3 or 4 inches in the very beginning and measure and make sure everything's right, and then double check our levels and make sure that everything is the way that we want it to be. Each throw is 14 inches before we change pins, and then we come up, bring the feet up, and move another 14 inches. Very important that we keep our towers level. It keeps your house level, and everybody works together to get that to happen. It'll lift about an inch every minute. So there's a 14-inch throw. It sounds like 14 minutes. However, we stop at given intervals and check to make sure that we've got a good balance constantly. So every 3 or 4 inches we'll stop, we'll check, or 6 inches. But again, I'm not concerned about how fast I'm lifting your house. I'm concerned about how safely I'm lifting it. The owner wants to have an 8-foot garage, so we're going to be lifting it up probably 9 to give the masons room to work. The best part about this lift system is once you get it up high enough, you just walk underneath it, you bring your machine underneath it. It makes it easier to dig out the underside of the house. One couple that I lifted, in fact, it was a large 3-story boarding house, and these owners were a little eccentric. So they had put 2 wine glasses filled with wine on their counter, and when we lifted the house, of course we didn't know they were there. When we set the house back down 2 weeks later, I went in the house, and the owner said to me, "Is my wine still there?" And I didn't quite get it because I wasn't looking on his counter. I looked at the counter, and I actually saw there were 2 wine glasses with wine there. And I said, "Yeah, they're still pretty full." And he laughed, and he said, "Yeah, we just wanted to know if you'd knock them over." So here we are. I think we're up at elevation. You can see now how clear the space and span is underneath it. We put extra supporting stab jacks, we call them, in the center of the beams just to give it some extra strength. And we use chains to chain the beam to the tower just in case there's high winds. Safety is the most important part. Once we get the house up, we want to make sure that we keep it up and safe. So you see we do that in a lot of different ways. Most lifters would leave after they finish lifting the house and get it to elevation. Their work is done. But at Tri-Bar, what we do is now we're just getting started. Our masons come in right behind the lifters. In fact, some of the lifters are actually family members of the masons. In a way, we're a big family. So the masons come in and we dig the footing. We push to get the concrete underneath it as fast as we can. So we're working immediately upon the lift. We get that dug out. And again, as I said earlier, we can actually move machinery underneath it and use our mini excavators to dig out that footing and get it done in a fast time. So in 2 days, we have a footing pour. And then in the 3rd day, we're starting to put block up. It's a raft footing, and the block then is set on top of it. It's a footing and a slab all in one. It looks like a bridge deck. It's concrete spread over crisscross steel, 12 inches on center, number 8 steel, 16 inches thick on the edges and 8 inches thick in the center. So think about that. That's what's underneath this house, which is, I think, a superior design, especially in the shore area. If you're going to have a slab, you might as well have the raft, which gives you a lot extra support. If you remember earlier in when we first got the house lifted, you saw a clear span underneath the house. There wasn't any place underneath that house that our mini excavator couldn't walk and dig, and safely, because remember, the lift tower is embedded in the soil slightly, and it's plumbing level and outside the framework of the house. So when we dig that footing and we're preparing, we're safe. The men can work easily. In fact, it's almost like having a big umbrella over the top of them. Rains, we work. Snows, we work. It's a safe environment. Sometimes we wrap it in the wintertime so that we can heat it up underneath just to continue the work. We'll work right through the wintertime. From my experience in construction, I have learned that the best way to organize a construction project is to be able to control each phase of it. I decided that I wanted to have not only the best lift equipment and the best lifting machine, but I wanted to have the best crew. That meant I wanted to be able to lift the house, to install the footing, to install the block, to do the carpentry, and to set the house back down. One step is following the other, and each is working hand in hand. And in doing that, I think created the best system for taking a home, lifting a home, and putting a new foundation underneath it and setting it down on the block. But there's no delays, and each one is trained. Each one knows the next job, and everybody's been working with each other for such a period of time that we work together as a team. I find some personal gratification in the lifting of homes because I find people have been pushed out because of the storm, and I wanted to make something better for them. I wanted to get them back in their houses quickly. So unlike other lifters that just lift a house, put it on cribbing, and then they leave, feeling their job is done, and there are many good lifters that they do that, the house will sit there until the mason contractor comes in. And that's something that I can't allow to happen. I lift a house, and I want my masons underneath there the next day or that day. Not only that, when you get ready to set the house back down, there's no calling a carpenter to get the carpenter to come to put the new sill plate in, which the mason isn't going to do, and the lifter doesn't care about. So with Tri-Bar, we lift it, we put the foundation in, the carpenters start working right away on the sill plate or any rot that's underneath your house, and then it begins to get lowered down on the new sill plate. We go from the beginning to the end, with each trade being a Tri-Bar employee and following the other. Other lifters are individuals, and they do good work as individuals, but there's no team in an individual.
After the lift, he came in with his people, and they did the foundation work, they did all the concrete work, and we were very, very, very satisfied.
Barry said when we lifted the house that he wanted everything off the walls because he felt that it would be safer. So after unpacking the house and fixing it, after going under, we repacked everything. And Barry came in and he was really, really good. We covered all the furniture. He had to box in the beams upstairs because it does have a cathedral ceiling. And when we came home, we just started again.
The house was close to the ground. The ground itself was saturated. There's a stream that runs underneath here, which has made it a very difficult substructure. All the stuff that was underneath the house was damp, some of it was rotted. There were sections of the house that weren't attached to each other. When they built new sections on the house, they never bothered to attach it, just put it on top of blocks. Whoever owned the house before used concrete in between joists to change the level of the floor so that you couldn't lift the house without having things fall off. So we spent 2 weeks underneath the house adjusting, lifting it 2 inches, measuring in the corners and finding out I had some sag here in different parts of the house, putting it back down, going back under and re-supporting it. Very untraditional because it really needed a lot of tender loving care. And once I commit to do something, I'm gonna do it. It just took a lot more time than I would have liked. Having said that, they're wonderful people to work for. And when I was lifting the house and I got it off the ground and I saw I had it solid and I didn't have any droopy roof and I knew inside the house it's pristine. You see, it's like a museum in there. So I was constantly thinking that I was lifting an egg. And I had to handle it that way. Not that I don't always do it, but this one, because of its sections, was much more difficult. Got it up and then decided we really needed to fortify the substructure with all the steel we put under it because the way it was supported before, you certainly couldn't support it. You couldn't put concrete in between joists. You couldn't do any of that stuff. So we tied and reconnected the houses so it became one house, where underneath it was actually 2 or 3 sections. I had created a substructure that was capable of lifting all 5 sections. When I sit down with those people after they've been in their home one day and I visit them, and I see their smiles and I see how happy they are, that's a payment that I receive that you can't place a value against. It really does feel so good that it's an added element to what I already do. I build stuff. That's what I've done my whole life.